everyone, and welcome to another Scotsway podcast. And this one is about this year's Glasgow Short Film Festival, which is on from the 22nd to the 26th of March. And I'm joined by Programme Director Sanne Jehoul and filmmaker Duncan Cowles. Hello, both.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Sanne, can you give us a bit of background to the festival and what people can expect this year?
Yeah, sure. So we're Scotland's leading short film event. We're going into our 16th edition this year, so it's been going for a while. Those who know us will know we used to be part of Glasgow Film Theatre. So for years we were a project of Glasgow Film, and we sort of sat as the opening weekend of the main festival. And then since 2015, we've been sort of our own 4 or 5 days in March. And then obviously had a few online editions, and this is the second physical one since the pandemic, and the first one where we're not doing also an online festival, so we're fully back in person, which is really nice. What people can expect, quite a lot. We've got sort of a Lebanese focus this year, which is supported by British Council, which involves sort of screenings and live events and a masterclass. We've got artist focus on Barbara Wagner and Benjamin de Burka, an artist duo, which I can talk more about later if you want. We've got a strand on artificial intelligence in filmmaking, sort of quite experimental films that collaborate with AI tech. In general, quite a lot of threads in the programme around performance and the politics of spaces and reclaiming spaces. And then like our competitions and our usual stable programming, so like comedy, horror, like really fun late night animations, and a few parties, obviously.
Of course. And just now that you're separate from the film festival itself, have you found that that's given you greater autonomy to do things your own way and go down different strands, or has it not made a difference?
I think we always had quite a lot of autonomy on what we put on. So I suppose it sort of went in two stages, in the sense that we were still a project of Glasgow Film when we sort of had our own dates and festival from 2015. But then in 2019, we also became an independent organisation. So we're an independent charity. We still collaborate with Glasgow Film quite a lot, but we are our own thing. And I think that's sort of, on the one hand, that's made things challenging in terms of not having that structure of a wider organization, but I think it's also given us quite a lot of freedom to sort of mold ourselves more in how we want to be and what we want to focus on.
And Duncan, what are you showing at this year's festival? What's your involvement?
So I'm showing a couple of films. So I've got a film in the Scottish competition and a film in the comedy programme. So can tell you about them if you want.
Yeah, that would be great.
The comedy one's quite easy. Well, I don't know if it's easy to explain, but it's a 1 minute film that I made for a laugh, and then hopefully it makes people laugh. It's called Seascape, and it's basically a lot of shots of seascapes, and then I'm just sighing over the background. So it's like a sort of little palate cleanser of a film, not to be taken too seriously. And then my other film's like a 19-minute film about what I suppose my granny died, and I kind of, the film is sort of like me dealing with that in the kind of months afterwards, and I sort of make 16 very short films within the one film as a way to kind of process the feelings that I had at the time, the feelings of like, sadness. It was sort of stuff like that. So yeah, it maybe sounds a little bit depressing, but hopefully it's not completely.
It has comedy in it as well. It's a tragicomic.
Yeah, it's hopefully got a sense of humor and also like some emotion in there. So I was it was a weird one because I'd made a film about my granddad dying when he died, and I was really resistant to make another film about a grandparent dying. So I don't want to be the guy that just makes films about dead relatives. But I just kind of couldn't do anything else. Like I sort of kept coming up with these ideas like all the time for films, but they kept kind of linking back to her in some way. And so I was like, I'm just going to have to deal with this. And I thought, well, how about I just make all of the ideas and put them in the one film? So originally there was like 30 ideas, and obviously I had to cut that down a bit. And it's still quite long, 19 minutes, but hopefully it doesn't feel long, because you're basically getting like 16 mini films within the one film. So yeah, hopefully it's good. I've not shown it before, so this will be the first screening. So yeah, it might be terrible. People might not like it, but hopefully they do.
I mean, it's maybe useful to say that there's like a Duncan's shown at GSFF a lot. I think most of the editions I've been involved, you've had a film and festival, and they have always gone down well. So I think I don't think we should worry too much.
Hopefully keeps going with that. Yeah, I mean Glasgow, to talk about the festival, they were the first people to ever show a film of mine back in 2012. So, and I think almost every year since then I've had a film in, although the last 2 years before this I don't think I did, but yeah, they've been like massively supportive of my career from the very beginning. So I think, and I've gone on to do other work and TV work and all this sort of thing, but actually the very first people almost to sort of support me on that journey of showing my work was Glasgow Short Film Festival. So yeah, it's a really important festival for like starting out filmmakers as well as people who've been doing it a few years like me.
That's interesting. And Sanne, do you recognise that as a really important part of what the festival does?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think we always sort of describe it as, we're a festival that on the one hand really celebrates short film as its own art form and really wants to sort of develop an audience for that, because I think we do sort of look for kind of, formal innovation and experimentation, and the kind of what that form opens up that maybe more commercial structures in cinema don't. But I think the other part of what we are is a talent development platform, particularly for Scottish filmmakers. And I think looking at like Duncan, but I think looking at a lot of filmmakers that have come through us, whether it's in like the Scottish competition or internationals, it's really nice seeing people come back with short film work and they keep making short film work. But a lot of them have also then gone on to do features and a lot bigger work. So it's, it is, I think, like a recent example in Scotland is Adura Onoshili's Girl, which opened Glasgow Film Festival and it premiered at Sundance this year. And her previous short, Expensive Shit, won our jury and our audience award. So it's quite nice to see that, because that is, I think it is such a core part of our remit to do that and to like place those filmmakers in a context of international work, but also make sure they have access to international industry and form those connections. And because I think Duncan as well has, and a few other people kind of from your generation, I'll say, like they have sort of formed really nice links with people in our circuit internationally, and that's then led to other collaborations. So it's important.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you, Duncan, since you've been showing films at Glasgow, are there now other places to show them, or is it still quite difficult to get your stuff screened?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I've got a track record of showing short film work and continually making short film work, I have had decent success with sort of showing work at other short film festivals and other festivals. But I mean, it's still, I wouldn't say it was ever easy. Every new film is sort of, sometimes you feel like you're still starting from scratch, even though some of the connections and the programmers. I think it's still, they're not going to show your film just because they, like your chat. I think they're still going to judge the film on its own thing. So I would never say it's easy, but I think definitely places like Glasgow has allowed me to meet other programmers and then develop connections, and then has probably led to showing my work in other places. Well, has definitely led to showing my work in other places. So yeah, and winning, I mean, I won the jury award at Glasgow in 2015 and 2016. And that also kind of like really exposed me to sort of like a lot more festivals who would get in touch because you'd won an award. So they were like, must be worth looking at. And then they end up showing your work. And that's kind of, so it's been massively like beneficial. So.
And you spoke there about the two films you're having on this year, and one of them's a minute and one of them's 19 minutes. This is maybe a stupid question, but is there a limit? What constitutes a short film, I guess? Sanne, what would you say? This is, this is 90 minutes. No, that's ridiculous. So how do you choose that? Or is that part of the programming?
I feel like this is not a short answer I'm going to give you, but I suppose I don't think you can like really say this is like a lot of festivals would sort of say anything from 60 minutes is a feature, but then a lot of festivals also won't accept shorts over 25-30 minutes, and then everything between it is mid-length. The stuff we accept in our submissions is up to 50 minutes, which a lot of the time I then wonder, like, is that useful? Because a film of that length, when we get a 40-minute film sent to us, it needs to be really stand out for it to take up that space, obviously. So I think on that level, it's sort of a complex question, but me and my colleague kind of consider short film more in a way that it is the length it needs to be, and that is beneficial because I suppose it's made not with a kind of commercial or distribution perspective in mind in a normal cinema. So it's not like I need to fit in this 2-hour slot kind of thing. We've shown, and this is obviously a bit of a joke, but it's an illustration of the ethos is that we've shown. We had a focus on an artist called Kevin Jerome Everson a couple of years ago, and he has done a million short films, which is an incredible body of work. But he also did an 8-hour film that is essentially like in real-time life in a factory in the US. So they're working day in a factory, and the whole process of that film is sitting through it as it's a working day. And so we made a joke about, well, it's a short film because it's sort of, it can't be anything but that length, and I think it's sort of also what we look for in the form is that it uses the time it has to use in a way. And
the opposite extreme of that is Skyscape, which I see on your website described as a microfilm, and I'm not sure I knew what that is, but then I watched it and I could totally see what that is. It really is just, as you said, that takes as long as it takes, in the same way as the 8-hour film took as long as it takes. Yeah, that's interesting, because I sat down to watch it and thought, oh, it's over already. I hadn't clocked that was the length it was meant to be. And it's also really interesting because I started sighing in response to it. It was like a Pavlovian thing, which
it's a problem now because I sigh a lot, and every time I sigh, it just reminds me of the film, and so I'm kind of continually haunted by my own film in everyday life, which is an odd thing. But it's I think I described it as a micro short just because I thought, well, it's tiny, innit? It's sort of like it's almost not, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if micro shorts are a real thing or not. I just call it a micro short.
I mean, there are sort of festivals that have entire sections dedicated to just under 3 minutes, and which is also its own interesting exercise.
Yeah, you wouldn't want a 19-minute version of Skyscapes.
No,
put it that way.
I'm sure there's someone who's done that and made someone sit through that.
You could probably loop it. You just loop it on YouTube. And
that's what's going to happen next. Definitely, I can see that. 24 hours.
24-hour Skyscape channel. Yeah, here we go.
So, Sanne, how do you approach it, programming a festival? Is it a kind of never-ending 12-month process?
I wouldn't say, well, I mean, to an extent, I suppose it is, but there's definitely months where it's a lot busier than others. I suppose our programming kind of works in, it has two sides to it, I suppose, because there's all the stuff that we do around the competitions, which are kind of the core of our program, but they are drawn from an open call for submissions. So that's open for like 6 months of the year. And this year we got just over 4,000 films. A couple of hundred will be from Scotland. All the rest is international. And for that, we kind of work with a big team of freelance pre-selectors. Right. And we go through, every film gets watched twice. They're being rated, they're being commented on. Every month we kind of have a little chat together. And the end of that process is kind of drawing up a long list and then going through a selection process with the team to kind of get to the final competitions. And that's that's a slightly different process because we are trying to then curate them in a way that has some thematic cohesion, but that's not how we set out, because it's more about what is, in our opinion, the most interesting new works that's come out. so there's that, and then the other part of the festival, all the special programming and thematic programming, that's much more, it starts from concept, it starts from what theme do we want to explore, what do we want to focus on, what artists do we want to highlight and invite over, and then that's more of a, you know, that from there you then start the research process via scouting at other festivals or doing research in other ways, and that, I think, it's sort of weird, you know, I think some festivals will have a very clear thematic framework per year. We don't really do this. Like, I'll look at stuff I'm interested in, and then usually gradually along the year, it kind of teases out threads, and you kind of shape it in that way. So there are things in today's program, this year's program, like other years, where like these are the things that kind of are, you know, coming to the surface, but it's not a clear, this is what we're doing approach. You know, I think there's quite a lot of different little discourses going on throughout it. So yeah. And
Duncan, you've taken your films to other festivals now. How does the Glasgow Short Film Festival compare? How does it differ, if at all?
Yeah.
The lulz.
Yeah, Glasgow's. I mean, it's weird. It's different because I live in Edinburgh, but I sort of think of Glasgow Short Film Festival as like my home festival. It's like the sort of, it's the one where you go and you catch up with loads of people that are filmmakers that you haven't seen in ages or don't get a chance to see, and then you meet new filmmakers and you kind of get a gauge on like what's happening in the short film scene in Scotland. So it's very different to, say, going to like a festival abroad where you might know less people. And yeah, so it's a sort of different thing. So, you know, I would say it's definitely one of my favorite festivals, if not my favorite. But it's obviously very different to going to like some festival in like Portugal, and where it's like really sunny and you get to like sit outside and like have cocktails and stuff. That's a very different experience to Glasgow. But it's yeah, I mean, I wouldn't sit here and say it's anything but good, obviously. So
yeah. I hadn't thought about the industry side of things, but I guess you are meeting up with fellow filmmakers that you might not see the rest of the time.
Aye, I mean, it's a pretty small. Well, it's a small industry in that you tend to start to know everyone, but at the same time, I still keep meeting new people. So I think that's just because I'm getting older and there's new people all the time. Like, it changes, isn't it? But it is like an industry within itself. And I think specifically like the short film industry can be quite its own thing. Like Sanne was saying, it's like an art form in itself. And it's like one of the most, it's a more immediate way of expressing yourself than, say, like I'm making a feature length documentary at the moment, and it's been going on for like 7 years. What I was feeling at the start of making that, probably very different to now what I'm feeling. Like, it changes. Whereas when you're making a short film, like something like Skyscape, you can literally express yourself very quickly in a short space of time and get it out. And that's like really satisfying as a creative person to be able to do that. So I always champion kind of like short films as, yeah, from an artist point of view, like it's like I don't see myself stopping making them, even though the expectation is you'll go on and do TV and feature length projects and all that. And that's kind of the way that the industry, I think, pushes you, which is good because I do want to do those things as well. But I think there should always be a place for like, yeah, short films as well, and not like I'm not in, you know, yeah, not going to be stopping making them soon. It'd be like saying to like try to think of an example, like a painter, why have you painted another picture? Do you know? Like, if you know what I mean, it's like, why?
I think,
like,
I mean,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I think it's also that sort of, because I think that pressure, that expectation of, you know, that you go on to do feature length work is much more prevalent within, you know, narrative fiction, narrative documentary. But then obviously when you look at a lot of sort of experimental filmmaking, animation, artist moving image work, a lot of them stay within like a short form format, because it's just, I mean, in terms of a sort of access, the type of audience, the budgets available, you know, I think that all kind of plays into it in those forms.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I speak to a lot of writers, and some of them, you know, they've started out as short story writers and are very, very good short story writers, but they feel that same pressure to, well, when's the novel coming out? And some of them don't write the novel and even stop writing because of that very pressure. Whereas for me, a great short story collection, a great short story writer is fantastic. And it seems to be similar, I think, with short film
Yeah, it's funny that analogy, because I think that does hold up with a lot of narrative work, but I always like, I think like people sort of make that analogy of like, you know, a short story versus a novel. And I actually think short film is a lot, it's, if you're gonna put it in that literary comparison, I think it's a lot more like poetry, because I think formally and structurally, like a lot of it, or a lot of the stuff that we show at least, I think that analogy fits it a lot better.
Yeah.
And that, I think that also makes more sense, because you're not going to tell a poet, like, you know, write a novel, like it's not the same thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. It allows for more experimentation, perhaps, with everything about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and you've spoken about competition, Sanne, and how important that is. Can you take us through some of the competitions?
So we have two. We've got the Scottish competition, and that's 4 programs. And then the Bill Douglas Award competition, which is the international one, that's 6 programs. So I think the Scottish one, it comes to something like 20 to 24 films, and the Bill Douglas one just under 30, I think. And yeah, I mean, both of them are we try, and especially in the international one, we try and make sure it's sort of from a very, that like it's formally diverse, you know, in terms of geographical backgrounds, diverse, like, so duration as well. So it's sort of what we think is the most interesting, but then also how we showcase the most, you know, varied collection of work. And each of those competitions has a jury award attached and audience award attached. So the juries are always sort of made up of international and national industry experts who attend the festival. And then since last year, we've started doing the Young Scottish Filmmaker Prize, which is sort of our 3rd competition. It's in collaboration with GFT as well. And that's sort of for really, you know, filmmakers just starting out. One of the programs is films that have had no support whatsoever, so entirely made independently without any funding. And so that's been quite a nice project to be involved in, because it's sort of now, you know, I mean, it's really interesting to then see what people are doing on absolutely nothing, and, you know, really, really young filmmakers. But it'll be interesting to see what they're then doing next. And, you know, the hope is then obviously that at some point you see them come in, they go into Scottish competition, like see that kind of arc happen over the next couple of years.
And you mentioned the pandemic. Were there films made during that time that perhaps wouldn't have been made otherwise, that you've discovered?
So many. Yeah, like, I mean, it's interesting because obviously there were a ton of the first year after the pandemic kicked off, the first call for submissions we did was just, there's so many lockdown films, you know, and a lot of them were, I mean, Duncan's probably, like, you've probably been exposed to that to an extent as well, but like there was so many films that were like, okay, I'm going to make something in my room. And a lot of that wasn't great, and it was quite depressing because it's not something you want to be confronted with. But then there's been amazing work that's come from our last, so our winner of the international competition last year was made in the director's room, but he's been so innovative with what he did. It was a documentary, and that went on to win ITFA in Amsterdam, you know, when essentially the biggest documentary festival in the world. So it was like a lot of people did really, really interesting creative stuff in that time. Like,
yeah,
it was. Did you do anything in reaction to that? What was that?
Well, it would sort not. I mean, it was weird because I'd just finished that film I mentioned earlier about my granddad dying. I made this film in my kind of mum and dad's back garden where I filmed all these insects, like really, really small, and talked about like feelings of like, yeah, kind of what I was feeling at the time when he died. And everyone assumed that was like a lockdown film, but actually I'd done it a few months before. It could have been a lockdown film, but actually I'd done it before that. And actually a lot of my films could well have been, like, I've made films where I've done it entirely in a living room, or I mean, most of the one this year, the one with my granny, a lot of that is done in like, well, in this room and my living room, and a lot of it's done at home. So a lot of my films could be lockdown films, but actually they weren't. I don't think I did anything in lockdown. I was doing a TV series during lockdown, so I was doing all the planning for that and then filmed that year, so that I was doing something, but not any real short form work that year. But yeah, I sort of felt like, well, let everyone else do something at home for once. Like, I'll take a break, you know.
And I think you mentioned that Skyscape is in the comedy. So is there a comedy strand? Is that kind of how you would?
It's not a strand, but we have sort of staple programming that comes back each year, and one of them is Shorts and Giggles, which is our late night comedy program, and then there's another one, Scared Shortlist, which is a horror program. So those two come back every year, and we kind of draw from partly from submissions and partly from stuff that we found elsewhere to curate those. And they're like, you know, they always do well. They're crowd pleasing programs. So.
And are there any other highlights you can tell us about? Because it's not as simple as just screening films. There's other stuff going on, isn't there?
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff going on. So so the Lebanese focus I mentioned, that's sort of in collaboration with Beirut Shorts, which I suppose is sort of our equivalent in Lebanon. And the artistic director there has put together 2 programs of work for us. And then there's one film screening in there, which won Sundance last year. And that director's coming over for a masterclass as well. And then the lead in that film, the film's called Warsha. The lead actor in that film is a kind of multidisciplinary performance artist based in Beirut. So he's coming over to do a sort of music dance performance in CCA. Wow. And that will then be followed by DJ sets by like local DJs, Hiba and How Bizarre, all in CCA. So that'll be really good. We're doing like a late night animation program called Welcome to the Multiverse, which is all these sort of like quite bonkers animations, but then that's followed by a DJ set again, which will have sort of animation visuals projected alongside of it. We're doing a walk, so we're showing a film. So our event Camino to COP, it's sort of 2 films about, one film is Of Walking on Thin Ice, which is a kind of document of this walk that happened in the lead up to COP26. It was a walk that happened from London to Glasgow over, I want to say 8 weeks. I've written 8 weeks. So like thousands of people did this walk, and it was documented. It was made into a documentary film. And then there's another short film that we're screening with that, which is about Indigenous activists in the Amazon also coming to Glasgow around the time of COP26. And so we're screening those together with a conversation, but in the lead up to that, we're kind of doing the last 5 miles of the original walk. So the audience can join that walk and then have a communal meal together before the screening. So it's things like that. Yeah. And there's a few other, so there's like artist conversations as well. And yeah, in general, a lot of socializing and drinks and music and, you know.
And Duncan, is there anything you're particularly looking forward to?
I mean, yeah, I kind of all of it. I mean, I suppose showing the film. I don't know if I'm looking forward to showing the film, or I'm probably nervous more than it's a nervous looking forward to showing my films. But I suppose it's the social thing is massively key, because it can be quite isolating being like a freelance documentary filmmaker. Is sort of I'm on my own a lot of the time, so it's just nice to actually go and like chat and be with other people. So yeah, that's probably what I'm looking forward to the most. Yeah.
I also might want to flag up, I don't know if you if you know, maybe some of your listeners have children, but Duncan's doing another. Do you want to talk about this? Like you're doing another little bit at the festival, which is new.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe what I'm doing other than so it's like on the Sunday, right? I don't actually know what time it is, but it's on the Sunday.
It's on the Sunday morning when we always have our family shorts program. So it's sort of family animations for all ages, and it's always followed by an animation workshop. And then Duncan's now doing a sort of special thing.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like going to scan people in 3D or let them scan each other in 3D and build a little, give people 3D models of themselves that they can, digital 3D models themselves, not physical ones, and they can take that away. Or I'm going to place them into like a little miniature scene, digital 3D scene that we can then like show on social media, or we can I don't know what we're going to do with it, to be honest, but we're going to do stuff. It's going to be fun. Yeah Basically scanning. I learned how to do it, and I thought, well, I might as well do something with this skill. And so kind of pitched this idea of scanning people. Originally I was going to say, can I scan every single person at the festival, but we've reined that in a bit to just scanning, which is probably for the best, just scanning yeah, each other during this little Sunday morning workshop. It's a bit of fun for kids, but I think actually adults will probably have quite a laugh with it as well, because it scans you pretty accurately, but then it will occasionally get, the technology sort of sometimes gets stuff wrong, so you might have like a massive ear or something. So it's a bit of a laugh. So yeah, Sunday morning, come and get scanned by me if you want.
There you go. There's an offer you can't refuse. That sounds brilliant. And with, you know, you mentioned the kind of social aspect and having kind of events in the CCA and stuff. It does seem to me, starting to go out to events and festivals again, that there's a real desire to get back to what it was like before and meet up and talk in person. Is that something that you've found as well? Sorry,
Do you yeah, I mean, I have had a lot of I've been doing a lot of thinking about that over the last year or two. I think especially since we've sort of been going back to things like I found I'm sort of really happy to see that people are really going back. You know, I heard GFF has had a great turnout, like really good audiences. I've heard this from a few other people. I think last year it was quite a different picture. I spoke to a lot of festivals, our peers, who all kind of encountered the same, that like attendance was down a lot. And I think it took a lot of time for people to come back to that. And I feel I've gotten back to that later maybe than everyone else, because I still I find planning really hard still, and especially I think because we've all sort of, I suppose our relationship to where we live has changed quite a lot. Like I noticed that I don't really, you know, I live in Glasgow South Side, and unless I have to, I will not cross the river, you know. Like it's sort of so going into town to me is still quite a thing where I'm like, oh, do I have to go into town? And I was a bit worried about that with the festival, whether other people would have that same feeling. But then I noticed people are really going back, and you know, ticket sales are going well and all this kind of stuff. So it's sort of making me quite happy to see that, because I think I'm just a bit later with it than most others. So yeah, I'm sure it's all still shifting, and everyone has a different relationship to it, but it seems to be going the right way. So
yeah, and I think with things like festivals particularly, but also just gigs in general, it's an individual thing, but the more people kind of do it, the more they kind of, I think, relax into it. I hope anyway. Duncan,
yeah.
what about yourself? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've been going to stuff and festivals again for, like, I was at festivals last year and things, and it just felt like kind of normal again, really. But it did take a while to get to that. Like, I don't think I didn't come to Glasgow Short Film Festival last year because like all my pals had COVID at the time, so it was just like it was still kind of going on at that point. Whereas this year, I'm not concerned about that. You know, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be there for most of the weekend, and looking forward to it kind of being like it was before. So yeah, but obviously it took a while for things to get back. But the pandemic now feels quite a while ago in my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And just talking to you about the festival, you know, the excitement and what's going to happen and everything, it's kind of palpable. And I think for people, when they hear that, you know, they themselves think, yeah, that's a place I want to be. And with that in mind, how best can people find everything about the festival and get tickets?
So our website is glasgowshort.org, which is where you can sort of browse the program, and it'll take you there. You know, every event will take you. We've got a ticketing platform, a new ticketing platform this year. So that's all via our own website. All our socials are at Glasgow Short, one word. So that you can find everything you need there and sort of be teased with little like trailers and little bits. Yeah, I think that's sort of the main ones to go to. We have a newsletter you can sign up for. And then during the festival, our festival hub is Civic House, which is sort of just north of Cowcaddon Subway by the canals. And that's kind of where, you know, a lot of us will be hanging out a lot of the time. It's where our kind of industry drinks are. Our guest desk is there. So it's always a good place to come to if you want more info of stuff that's happening, or, you know, if you want people to give you advice or guidance, like that's a good place. And then everything else is happening in GFT and CCA.
Brilliant. And I'll put links to all of those when this podcast goes out. But for now, thanks so much to both of you for talking to me. I've really enjoyed it, and I really can't wait to see the festival for myself.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.